My contract in Ferrari was actually under COVID. So to be fair, I signed to move to Paranello without putting a foot on actually any Italian land. So I think I signed the contract without realizing, like there's a part of you that realizes because you always have the logos on the paper, but you don't have the awareness as when we landed. You just look at that and there's this massive big yellow shield, which is in the building that is specialized in the Formula One team. And it's a strange feeling. You know, it's real, but it's a little bit like, am I dreaming? It's a nice feeling. It's a very nice feeling. If you think about it, Formula One was a primarily European sport. The majority of the fan base was European based. And suddenly you have this humongous reach in the North American, particularly in the US, where they were okay, but not really very interested, and suddenly massive boom. And of course, tapping into the American market is a massive change for every brand. How thin is the line between the individuals and the brand? Some people get so connected to the brand they're working for that they believe they are the brand. Therefore, they become like this doctrine that you have to follow to be or not to be. So it's important to remember that brands are almost like a persona. The brand should be bigger than all of us, and none of us should be them.
Behind every dashboard, every ADAS feature, every HMI, every EV battery lies a human story. I'm Stéphane Lagrelle, and this is Under the Hood, Automotive Storytelling, a podcast where we uncover the narratives that drive innovation. In an industry that is impacting the lives of so many people around the world, it's the power of storytelling that ultimately connects technology to humans. Today, I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Nerea Palacios. Nerea, bienvenue.
Thank you, Stéphane. Happy to be here.
All right, Nerea, I'm so happy, and I would love people to know more about you. And if you allow me, let me introduce you to our audience. So Nerea, you are the founder of Pala Consulting, where you work as a brand ecosystem strategy and creative operations consultant. Through this company, Pala Consulting, you partner with companies across motorsport, sports lifestyle, and performance sectors. Your focus is on helping them align brand, creative, and operations because, as you say, quote, a brand only works when every part of the system is built with consistent ingredients. You specialize in key areas such as brand positioning and architecture, tone of voice, and storytelling systems. And this is why I'm so happy to have you here, but also product and packaging integration, trade and go-to-market planning, and finally, sponsorship strategy. Before launching your consultancy in Nerea, you held significant roles, leading major brand and creative operations at global players like Ferrari and Under Armour. At Ferrari for 4 years, you were deeply involved with the racing division, holding roles like creative ops manager, head of creative services for racing, and leading brand comms for racing. And this is actually how we met when I was managing the relationship with Scuderia Ferrari during the partnership with Harman Automotive. Your work here at Ferrari included evolving the brand strategy and storytelling platforms for the Ferrari racing team, leading creative direction for Scuderia Ferrari's global identity, and building the creative infrastructure behind the F1 storytelling. At Under Armour for almost 4 years, you directed global brand marketing and creative strategy for football and rugby, and you were a creative lead for categories like men's training and team sports for EMEA. You also have experience with EA Sports, Heist Mobility, and your own ventures like Supporters.pro and 2 Socks, 1 Cat, which is very interesting name. Nerea, you are known and recognized for building brand systems that perform. Your background is all about translating vision into execution at the highest level and bridging the gap between technical excellence and compelling narratives, which is exactly why I'm so glad to have you here. During our chat to prepare this podcast episode, we shared insights into the complexities of working in Formula One, like the challenges of balancing creative ideas with strict performance requirements, such as weight limits affecting even the paint choices. And if you have any interest in Formula One, dear auditors, I can tell you that you will hear what's happening behind the scenes like nowhere else. We also discussed the preparation of this podcast, how decisions that seem simple from the outside are incredibly constrained by technical realities and require consciousness of many pieces of the equation. These are exactly the kinds of, as I say, little stories behind the grand story of automotive innovation that we love to uncover here. You have also a unique perspective on the industry's rapid change, a world where telling the right story is crucial. We believe that in the age of AI, the concept of a curator who can shape and refine information will become increasingly relevant. Nerea, your blend of high-level brand strategy, deep operational experience, and time at iconic brands like Ferrari and Under Armour gives you a truly unique voice in automotive storytelling. Nerea, welcome to Untold.
Thank you so much. It's a very nice introduction. I'll send it to my mother. She will be proud.
Absolutely. I hope you would. Hey, Nerea, the first question I'd love to ask you, and it really relates to the first moments I had myself when I came in Maranello for the first time and getting into the office, really having this feeling that I was getting behind behind the curtain. I wanted to ask you, how did you feel the day that you actually signed your contract at Ferrari?
Wow. My contract in Ferrari was actually under COVID. So to be fair, I signed to move to Paranello, the region of Reggio Emilia, without putting a foot on actually any Italian land. So I think I signed the contract without realizing, like, there's a part of you that realizes because you always have the logos on the paper, but you don't have the awareness as when we landed, we had to do the quarantine. And then I remember going for a walk with my wife and our dogs to the office before it was open because it was winter and there was the winter holiday. And yeah, you just look at up and there's this massive big yellow shield, which is in the building that is specialized in the Formula One team. And I think I don't know, it's a strange feeling. It's real, but because you haven't put a foot yet in the building, it's a little bit like, am I dreaming? Is it really happening? It's a nice feeling. It's a very nice feeling.
And did you join Ferrari before the Netflix series Drive to Survive or after?
I was in there, I think, first, probably they have air. If I'm not mistaken, I air the first season of Carlos Sainz. So I think Drive to Survive. I joined when the season aired, when they communicated to Sebastian Vettel that the contract was not going to be renewed. So I think it was in the earliest stages before Drive to Survive. Boom.
Because the Drive to Survive is a clear explanation of the power of storytelling, right? As far as I'm concerned, I was a massive Formula One fan, and especially when there were drivers like Prost and Senna and others like that, and even Schumacher. And then my interest in the Formula One faded away, like many people. And then suddenly there is this Netflix series out of nowhere that starts to have very, very powerful stories and those kind of behind the scenes. And suddenly you see the interest growing up massively. So from your perspective, how did this impact your work when you saw all these new ways of telling stories around Formula One?
I think probably what I was experiencing was like many other teams or people working within in the industry probably felt it was an uncharted territory, like a little bit. It reminds me of the earlier times for all those singers that came from those programs that was very early. They will try to scout new talent, and some of them became very big. You knew something was about to change, and you knew within the team, it was clear that we were about to receive a new wave of fun. And some of them were not the traditional fun, because as you said, like for many years, motorsport has been populated by true, in Ferrari, you will call them real tifosi. Like it's almost like family inherit. It grows within where you're living, and in your family, you grow with motorsport, and then it becomes part of your family identity or your time versus Drive to Survive, like completely shake things around from a gender point of view, for sure. Like suddenly a lot more women were interested in it, but also it break demographics as well as like geography as well. If you think about it, Formula One was a primarily European sport. Majority of the fan base was European based, and suddenly you have this humongous reach in the North American, particularly in the US, where they were okay, but not really very interested, and suddenly massive boom. And of course, tapping into the American market is a massive change for every brand. So yeah, I remember the first Miami race when I was, and then Las Vegas comes in. So the US goes from 1 to 3 in a matter of nothing. And I think big part of it is probably Netflix.
And so Formula One is really a world where there is so much a blend between the human stories, the drivers, the teams, the mechanics, the engineers, and then the technology. The Formula One is known to be the pinnacle of automotive technology. How did you manage to actually tell stories that would both talk about the human part of things and the technology part of things?
I think you can imagine, like, from the outside, it might sound strange, but once you're living surrounded by the people, both the ones that are more related with data decisions or those that are like more on the human side, you have to put yourself sometimes in the foot of the people that form part of those teams. Like they're traveling the world for 24 races in a year, which means that for almost 24 weeks a year, you're going to be surrounded by people that they have to bring whatever you learn in the factory is going to have to be translated into the track, and you have a limited amount of time to do that translation. Doesn't matter how much data you have, it will give you an advantage. But at the end of the day, it's a very human sport because you need to ensure that everybody is on the right mindset for things to go well. A sensor, data sheets, all of those, they are going to, of course, help you to facilitate a lot of decisions. But at the end of the day, you are asking a person who is a driver to risk their lives driving this car that you have set up based on data. And then you have to have these people within the team that need to measure very carefully what the data is telling you, what the analysis and the simulation over the previous weeks is telling you versus what the individual in front of you is telling you. And you need to, some people have this amazing job of balancing the data and the human side and defining what is the right decision for everyone, because it's like you see two drivers and you have around 100, more than 100 people with the drivers on track, and then you have more than 1,000 people within the factory. So you need to count all these decisions that have been building up to the end, putting the driver in a position to perform. So it's a lot more human than we think, because again, it's a person saying, I feel comfortable, or this is not reacting the way I feel. It's interesting. It's a more of a mental game where you need to work to make sure everybody feels in the right mindset to perform at their best, and not just the driver, everybody. Like the engineers need to be quick, analyzing the data that is coming from every point. The mechanics need to be quick, knowing that even if you make a mistake, you're not allowed to overthink it because you need to keep moving. There's a limited time for you to finish. So it turned to be very human for me, even though it's supposed to be the most advanced technological sport in the world. It is a team, and teams are made by people for now, at least.
True. But I'm trying to think about the balance you had to find, right? Because as a company, whether you're Ferrari or McLaren or Martin, whatever, or Mercedes, I guess you have to think about what will be the most useful for my business, for my brand. And so I guess that the balance between, okay, I'm going to communicate on the glamorous part of it, the drivers, and on the other side, the really extremely high technology that you need to bring to win the next tenths of second. And so how have you been balancing that, you would say?
I think it's by segmentation at the end. Like the beauty
Okay.
of the sport is in reality, and I think this is something that Formula One has understood very well. I'll never forget, an ex-driver was with us in one of the races, and he refused to watch the race through the TV. He was watching the race on his phone, and he was just looking at the sectors and the mini sectors within the sectors. He was just looking at the color of bars, and he didn't want to see the TV. And I was like, why? And at the end, with time, you realize that the beauty of the sport is like you can consume it in so many different ways. Like Formula One, you can tap in, get on board of the driver that you prefer and watch it through that driver specifically. You can consume it through broadcasting that will create shows around you on drive information, or you can consume it strictly by data. Like you have amazing partnerships, like I think Formula One with AWS, they have breakdown, completely new ways of information or way to consume things that before didn't exist. And I think is a beauty thing, no? You can decide based on who you are and what really interested you, what is going to be the most relevant piece of information. The same way there are people, I'm pretty sure, like will go there, have a fantastic time on the weekend, and then they will never watch another race, but they were very happy to go there with their friends because, again, drive to survive effect. So you have all these personas, and kudos to Formula One. They have managed to tell the same story from so many different angles to engage with so many different audience that you can tap into the championship when it's happening through data, through a broadcaster, or 1 year later through Drive to Survive, and everybody received the same package. It's just label it differently for different audiences. So that's pretty interesting. It's quite unique. I don't think there's many sports that have these different ways of experiencing the same thing through so many different angles.
What was the biggest challenge in your job?
Learning things about racing. I think they could really interact with you. I'll never forget, I had the blessed to be baptized by fire, meaning that at my early days in Ferrari, I was almost put right into production of content. And I remember we were planning what they call filming day. Filming days is those days where FIA provided the chance to run the car for X amount of kilometers or laps or whatever you want to define it, depending on the rules that change. Sometimes it's time. And you need to build, the whole is a TV production, almost live. But we were having conversations with engineers. I needed to land us the car and the drivers and everything. And I remember being very honest at the early stages and saying, I'm very sorry. I'm going to just apologize to everyone, but I am not 100% sure I know everything you guys are going to be saying in this meeting. So I will interrupt and ask you what are certain parts or words that you're going to be saying mean. So I accepted that it's such a different language. It's so specific to the sport. Like every single piece of the car has a name and there's a lot of pieces. So yes, if you knew, that was interesting for me.
And you were talking about the FIA. Obviously, Formula One is a sport that is extremely regulated. I mean, you have everything is scrutinized, and as a big Formula One fan, I'm always surprised by how many rules and stuff like this. So how is this impacting the brand story or those regulations that you have to deal with, and that sometimes limiting the way that you can differentiate from the other teams?
It's quite extent to the point like at the beginning, the sport didn't have a budget cap. So basically, if a brand wanted to invest in a team, the team would be happy to receive the money. But as on the way of partnership and how we got to know each other, like brands want to build stories around things that are meaningful for both entities so they can resonate with both their audiences, because at the end, they want to take the audience of those that they are sponsoring to come closer to them through this sponsorship. So one of the things that happened through the journey that I had the chance to experience was that a lot of people that were investing in the team with the regulations on the budget cap, suddenly you were forced to look at those previous sponsorship that were part of the development of the team in a completely different way, because you have certain amount to spend. So it was great to take a sponsorship, but if you wanted to take a sponsor that actually wanted to meaningfully contribute to the performance of the team, that will now be different because it will have to be evaluated. And this is something that FIA provided. All the rules, for example, is you have very limited time to capture content, to tell stories. So you don't have necessarily, like, you cannot run infinitely the car, not even the old cars. Yes, you could run the very old cars, but there is, like, they're almost embargo, the amount of laps or the amount of time on track that you can do with the drivers and cars from previous years. So you have to be very careful on the decisions that you're going to be making when you're creating content around this particular environment, because every second counts and you need to make it count. And you need to think when you create content, especially from a team point of view, that content should be valid or useful for, in the case of Ferrari, over 25 partners. And they all have very different needs. So you need to think, okay, I need to make my team and my brand happy, but I also need to make sure that what I'm creating is neutral enough to be reused by different kinds of brands or stories. So it was it was fantastic. If you're paranoid and you have some sort of OCD, you will love it. Absolutely. It's a great environment to develop those skills.
And talking about the sponsors, obviously, I was in a company that was one of them. And it was fascinating to see you guys juggling with all the different sponsors and their requirements. And obviously, everybody's fighting for visibility and to get as much time as they can with the different drivers and the cars. And so from a pure brand perspective, how complex was it to balance the brands from the sponsors versus the Ferrari brand versus eventually the drivers, which are brands in themselves sometimes?
That's a very valid point. I think some people might make the misconception that the drivers are the brand that they're driving for. And one of the things that is happening recently is like most athletes, not just in Formula One, but everywhere, like they're dragging their own fan base. People used to follow teams. People follow athletes now, almost more than so they follow the team. So you're completely right to flag that we're not dealing with one, but we're actually dealing with three. In the case of Ferrari, you could arguably say four, because even though Ferrari for us is just red cars, like within Ferrari, you have arguably we can call it three ecosystem. You will have the luxury fashion brand. Recently, for some people are familiar with it, you will have the luxury car, and then you will have the racing team. But they all have very different needs, but they all coexist under the umbrella of that big Ferrari name. So when a partner will come, you will need to analyze it. Is it okay from a driver point of view? Is it okay for the racing team? Is it okay for the luxury brand? Is it damaging or creating any potential conflict with our fashion line? And then, and only then, you'll have the chance to really think about what can we do with a partner. So again, the job, the colleagues that I had, they were like what we will call account managers. They were basically there to make sure that the partners were heard and protected. Is difficult because sometimes, especially in a sport like this, everybody's so focused on performance that we forget that we need the sponsors to perform. You need that investment and that story to grow the brand, but also financially support what you're trying to build. So it's a very interesting landscape where a lot of things are moving into terrain. And when a story magically happened to get the proof for all three, or arguably four in this particular case, yeah, it was very nice, because then you begin to understand that, at least how I see it, a partner that does a good job is not just a partner, is also, to a certain extent, is like a paid media. At the end, is another kind of paid media, is guaranteeing you that you're going to be eyes on those stories, either through their channel or your own channel. So it's important that you build those stories as good as you can so you don't alienate anyone.
And I remember when I first heard internally at Harman Automotive that we would be partnering with Scuderia Ferrari. I've been making some research and I was pretty stunned by the number of B2B companies that are entering the sport, which can be seen as more as a B2C sport, right? Because there's a massive public, there's a massive audience, massive fan base, and especially for a brand like Ferrari. What do you think is driving B2B brands to Formula One?
I think every brand probably has their own data behind the decisions they're making. It's naive to think that right now a person is going to say, oh, I really think our logo will look great there. you probably know it better than me, that you have a lot of data points that you're going to analyze to see if both brands are the right match. In the case that the brands are the right match, I think one of the unique things that Formula One's offer compared to other sports is that the events are long and they last 2 to 3 days and they go around the globe. So you can guarantee that if you're expanding a brand beyond one market into, let's say, global scale, there's no many sports that are going to allow you to drag that tension so specifically. And again, for me, the hospitality that you can provide and the experiences you can build, it's impressive because you can have somebody that will be. I had the chance to host people that were rewarded by the company for good performance, and also CEOs and presidents, and everybody has, for the time that they are in this environment, they feel blessed and they're very happy, and you like level up, no? Like you level up the person that could be considered like as a normal person, and the person that is going to be making the decisions for everybody behind them. For a little bit of time, they're even. And that is unbelievable because it's going to allow you to build truly meaningful connections with your clients in a way that is very difficult, that somebody's going to grant you access to their time for such extended period of time. So it's very interesting. I think the physical time and that B2B well built and the experiences that and the meaningful impact that you're going to have in someone's life by providing them this particular experience. I think you experienced it with us, or I experienced it together with you on your first time. It changes, no? You feel blessed to be in that position, and you feel grateful that the people that are inviting you are thinking of you in that way. And I don't know, it's something interesting, and not two races are the same, even in the same location. So it's pretty unique context. I don't think there's many situations that are going to give you that setup at that level of performance at a global scale.
Yeah, you raise an excellent point. And I can't recall seeing anyone walking on the paddock, looking at the cars, watching the teams practicing wheel change, pit stops. I don't recall anyone being insensible to it, right? Everybody has child eyes looking at the cars, looking at being able to make a selfie with a driver. It's like the trophy of the day. And it's pretty stunning to see how the Formula One once, let's say, 7-8 years ago, was a close thing for old people and stuff, how it managed to bring to a state where it's for women, it's for men, it's for old, it's for young people. It really manages to bring everybody together. And I tend to think that, yes, there is the technology, there are the engines and the sound and all of this, but I think there is just this powerful story of men looking for the highest performance, right, through incredible machines.
I've been blessed. I had like fantastic experiences. There is something there that when you're very invited into our garage and you hear the engine, but also you see, if you are had the chance to be in a garage during a race, you can feel the tension in the mechanics. So I think if we will try to say, okay, what does this feel like? It's almost as if you were invited to the bench of a football team during a football match and you could sit with them for a little bit of time. And I think that's weird, but natural in this environment. But once you enter there, like, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're coming from, like, you understand that there is a bigger respect to the craft of the people around you trying to achieve a victory. And I think also once you're there, you understand that, yes, the driver is a track, but everybody around you with the colors of the team that you will be surrounded by, it's equally involved. And it changes, like, doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, it really level. And for me, that was beautiful.
But I think that I love the analogy that you take with a rugby or football, except that there is this super high tech aspect to it, right? If you go to the paddock and you manage to see the garage and you see all those computers and screens and so on, right? So there is this, I think, pretty unique blend of technology and people, humans, teams How did you manage to translate the technology aspects to massive audiences? I don't recall how many followers Ferrari has on Instagram, for instance, but we are talking about millions, right?
I think one of the advantage of it is like everybody believes that they can be a strategist. That's the beauty of it. I think the strategist is the pool position that everybody's gonna hammer on. And strategy is technology today. It is a person that has a voice, but everything behind that person is a lot of data transfer from different departments. You have the data about the tires, you have the data about the weather, you have the data about how the other cars are performing on track, you have the data of your simulations, like your sensors on the car, the temperatures, everything. Everything is an anchor point. So it's not difficult to translate these stories because you have, or you can easily find a spokesperson for them. And you can eventually find somebody that is going to explain you very clearly why it's so relevant, that technology behind it, like why it's so relevant that you constantly are testing on a wind tunnel, why it's so relevant to understand the setup of a track, why it's so relevant that the driver talks to they have a coach that is with them and is analyzing the data and the power and how that affects the configuration of the car. So technology is embedded. Like it's not, I don't think the Formula One that we know today will exist without it, because we have developed, or the cars have been developed to a way, or the sport has developed to a way that it doesn't exist. Yes, we see the drivers at the end because the way Netflix has presented it makes us connect with it. Because before that, it was technology. Yes, of course, people are driving that technology, but everything around it is innovation to the max. Like you will do everything now. It's like how much is going to cost you 1 second. That is the end, the question that the engineers are going to ask. Is this investment going to give me the second that I'm so desperately looking for? And those stories, or those like innovation, like every brand will find a way to cater to the way they already were talking about it. But you have such a robust abundance of innovation behind the people that you just need to know very well what is the story that you want to talk or tell. And I think the teams are going to have people around you that are going to help you, point you in the right direction until both parties align in what is the right story to tell.
I'd like to switch gears a little bit, pun intended, and talk about culture. Obviously, Scuderia Ferrari is very Italian, and at the same time, it's a global brand, right? The audience is global. So how did you manage, and what were the challenges to manage this kind of dichotomy between the fact of being very proud of the Italian culture and at the same time the global audiences?
It's complicated. I think it's complicated for every brand. I remember situations where we're looking at the fan base very early when I was in the team. There was this instinct, no, from a brand point of view, to talk in your own language. And of course, Ferrari in this case is Italian. And then you realize, as we said at the beginning of the conversation, like Netflix changed everything. Suddenly, your audience that was very controlled and very stable and very solid and very loyal has expanded beyond. So I think you need to ask yourself if you were talking in the right language, or if you're communicating correctly, like language or the way we talk, or the voices we use as a brand, or the tones we use. Like we learned that those were also in need of development. We also needed to ask the question that if we were able to evolve as much as the sport was evolving, even if we wanted or not, at the end you are living in a constantly evolving scenario, and you need to make decisions very quickly to make sure you don't lose people that are going to have interest in your brand. Understanding how to talk or resonate with those that are willing to listen for a little bit, to make sure that they are not just willing to listen for a little bit, but that you can extend. That makes you question how can you balance the identity of Ferrari and that Italian soul, and how you can make sure you don't damage it, but that you build on it to make sure that those that are not Italian feel welcome. And I think that's one of the beauty things that you can definitely, I think, if you've been a follower of Ferrari for the last 3-4 years, you can see a big change in the way how the team realized that they needed to be welcoming to those that were arriving for the first time, to make sure that they felt that they have a home and that they could be part of the Scuderia journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Because not only you are welcoming people that were not Italians, but you're also welcoming people that didn't have this Formula One culture necessarily, and that they just discover Formula One through another lens that we have been used to, through the Netflix lens, right? And then suddenly they come to your world, and maybe this is where you need to adapt the storytelling on your side so that you indeed, as you say, make sure that everybody's welcome.
Correct. And the way the algorithms are going now, like you almost need to cater to all of the audiences, like almost personalized content. So one thing that is very different when, at least on the team side versus the brand side, is that the team massively develops content all the time because they know that their segmentation is so broad that they need to make sure something is targeting each one of them, versus a brand is a little more consistent on the voice because you're targeting just one all the time. So it was very impressive to see how what you're asking, like how that voice expanded more and more to make sure you were talking to the people the way they are going to listen to you. And that happened, and it continues to happen more and more. You can see like most of the teams produce an unbelievable amount of content and at unbelievable speed and always genuinely new, which is impressive if you think about the people behind those teams and how they have to keep their brain fresh and active, because it's the social game is very hungry all the time and you need to make sure you feed it, especially here. So it is interesting, and cultures at the end is, I don't think there is a right or wrong way. Like you need to listen to the people that you have around you in the team and find what is not going to make your Italian colleagues feel uncomfortable, but is also going to make sure that those like myself that came from abroad also feel part of it. And then you build from there, from the people you have around, you listen to them, you slowly start building something that makes everybody feel a little bit more comfortable and more connected.
If now we are looking towards the future, so we have been talking about Netflix a lot, but you just mentioned social media. Formula One was completely outside of social media for many years, and since it has new owners, then they switch gears completely and move very much towards social media. What are the other trends that you foresee that would impact the way we tell stories in automotive and the way we communicate on automotive technology?
I'm very curious about immersive reality. I think NFL has been dabbling a little bit around it. Like they're trying to test. They collect also an insane amount of data. It's probably one of those sports that has a lot like that. And if you think about the latest investment from Apple, where they did like the whole Monaco track and how they activated it, it's impressive. I think we're consuming a lot of the sport through traditional screen,
Mhm.
but it's a sport that has a lot of 3D in it and environments and changes in cities and weather. So I'm very curious, how close are we going to get from that gaming mindset that we were coming versus like the reality? Like you can see it even now, no, with the driver eye. We're trying to get as close as possible to being that driver, or to have this feeling of what the driver has. You have the heartbeat for a while, it was there available. Like they're always trying to find some new way to tell the same story, because at the end the circuits don't change. So the challenges with Formula One is when you know that you have a season that is very stable and that is repetitive, you're going to have to find new ways of telling the same story. So I definitely think there is an unbelievable development in technologies nowadays that maybe are going to give us a new way of feeling the sport. I'm very curious. I'm pretty sure there is a bunch of companies working really hard to give us really nice experience. I think I saw a few things that they were brainstorming or thinking about that are, yeah, as a fan and as a consumer, I'm really curious how we're gonna be watching all of these in a few years, because it might be completely different, like at the speed that we are evolving. I'm really curious of that, to be honest. Also, yeah, very curious.
All right. We are getting to the end of this podcast, and I'm sure that everybody who's listening to this is, oh my gosh, you should have asked this and asked this. And I think we could have stayed probably hours and hours talking, Nerea. But there is one question I'd love to ask you, and this is the question I'm asking every guest in this podcast. What would be your storytelling advice or advices you would like to give to our audience?
I think we talked about it before this podcast. One of the things that has surprised me the most wherever I've been is how thin is the line between the individuals and the brand, and how easy it is to get lost thinking that you are the brand. Even as a founder, I've seen it. Like Under Armour had the founder was alive, and when I was there and still is. In many organizations, like some people get so connected to the brand they're working for that they believe they are the brand. Therefore, they become like this like doctrine that you have to follow to be or not to be. So it's important to remember that brands are almost like a persona, and none of us should be them. We should always try to understand them, trying to see what story do they feel like telling, what is the way they want to communicate, and don't cross the line. They don't need to be you and you don't need to be them, but you do need to understand them to make sure that you're telling their story truthful to them, as if it was a person, as if it was somebody that you have a healthy relationship with. But don't get confused, don't try to be them, because then you maybe are going to be a little bit biased to what you think your audience is, and your audience might not be you. And then you're going to get into a problem of why is this performing or this not performing, or just try to remember there's nothing wrong with the passion that a lot of people have behind their jobs and the brands they're working for. Just remember that the brand should be bigger than all of us, and our jobs is to make sure they have a fair treatment and we protect them and empower them so everybody can love them as much as the people that love them the way, to the point of saying that they are the brand.
This is absolutely amazing to have you here, Nerea. And this last question brings us to the end of this episode. So thank you so much, Nerea. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Before I close, I'd like to say that Nerea loves to talk to people who are interested in brands and brand stories. And I would absolutely recommend to follow Nerea on LinkedIn and to not hesitate to contact her if anything that we have been discussing today resonate with you. Thank you again, Nerea, for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's really an honor.
So if you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast from and share with friends and colleagues who are passionate about the future of automotive technology. Remember that behind every dashboard and every feature lies a human story. And those are the stories we are committed to uncovering here on Under the Hood. I'm Stéphane Lagrelle. Thank you for listening. See you next time.